Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. This is a recent reads video in which I talk about the books I have read lately. It might almost be considered a November reads. I realize I started the month with something by Jamaica Kincaid, a very short book, and that will not be covered in this. But I will talk about the 4 books subsequent to that, and I will not go into any great detail. Recently, there was a video by booktuber Michael K. Vaughan, I believe, in which he talked about how he really needs to read faster. Now, he took it upon himself to do something called the 500 Book Challenge, in which he commits to not purchasing another book until he has read 500 books, which he already owns. And he did some calculation at the present rate of reading. He expects to be finished in the year 2078 or something like that. So he posted a video in which he said, I really need to read faster. I feel something of the same feeling because I've only really read these 4 books, which I'm going to talk about. It is now the 29th of November. But that said, it's really turned out for me to be a marvelous reading month. I could not have asked for a better month. Maybe it is because I just come off of 2 solid months of reading fiction, and now I'm back into nonfiction, which is my preferred sort of reading, I think. But I managed to, with those 4 books, accomplish some long-standing goals, perhaps, at least fill in some gaps in my knowledge, which have been long overdue in being filled. So I began with a couple of books by E.D. Morel. I don't know if they were intended together. There's a 1 and a 2. So 10 Years of Secret Diplomacy, and then Truth and the War. So 10 Years of Secret Diplomacy talks about the secret diplomacy among European powers behind the back of Germany prior to World War I. Truth and the War is a book written subsequent to commencement of hostilities. Hostilities, I suppose, is putting it mildly. Commencement to the war, in which he recaps some of the old information. There's actually a brilliant 2-chapter summary at the end, in which he recaps everything in this book very succinctly. And I feel that with both of these books, I have a handle on the First World War that I never had. I had read the poets that came out from that time period, Wilfred Owen and many others. And so I had some sense of the war in terms of the human cost. And I had read Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves, I think, and the one by Ray Marquet, a German soldier's perspective on the conflict, and probably 1 or 2 other little things. So from the human perspective, I think I had a sense of the war, as well as some plays and stuff that I'd seen. But I never really had any clue from a policy standpoint why the war happened. And Morel really spelled it out very nicely. I don't understand so much the relationship between Russia and France, but at the time it was generally assumed that they were joined at the hip, so to speak. And so when Russia decided to call up troops, Germany felt that there was no recourse but to attack France because she knew she would be surrounded on both sides. And so that was the commencement of the war. Now, the prior conditions, such as what Russia was doing in Serbia, in conflict with Austria, I have not studied that. But the reason that the war became a German/English war, Morel gives a pretty succinct explanation for. Now, this book, Truth and the War, was a little bit more discursive, but it was still being sort of a monument of the time, definitely worth reading. These books have been in my stack, or in this case, they were in the basement for a long time, but I've had them for at least a dozen years, maybe 15 years. They were remnants of a failed project that I had intended, a playwriting project. And so just pulling them out and reading them really brought me a step closer if I ever decide to revive that project. But even without that, it gives me a more comprehensive viewpoint of the world, of the milieu in which Morel lived. And that was one aspect of the play that I had planned. So, very satisfactory. Then I jumped into Other Minds, and I criticized it in a long video, which probably should not have been even posted, where I went into all of the little qualms I had, but aside from that, it's really the first stab I've taken at natural history, even though it's actually philosophy, but the first occasion I've had to dedicate my mind to something other than, say, human political history in decades. I haven't read anything like this for a long time, and I've realized that this is a new vista for me to start traveling into. So it was a great break from the war. You are served well to be reminded that beyond our human foibles, there is a whole lot of world and life going on. There is more than is dreamt of in our philosophy, so to speak. So I really loved the introduction to the Cambrian and by default the Precambrian periods, and I will be keeping my eyes open for more books which touch upon those periods. Now, the fault of this book, I think, was that the author is not a scientist. He is a philosopher. And as such, the thinking felt a little bit murky to me. That may simply reflect my own lack of training in philosophy and my own disinclination towards philosophy also. After that, I jumped into Spies in the Congo. Now, Susan Williams is an author I've read, 3 books now, including this one, and so I have some good respect for her. There was only one persnickety part where either she failed or one of her proofreaders failed, and that was early in the book. I'm not going to look it up in the index, but somewhere maybe page 50, she mentions the American writer John Gunther, who traveled to the Congo and said this and observed that. And then he's brought up again at page, I don't know, 220 or something. And she refers to him as John Gunther, comma, an American author, blah, 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 which the articles, definite and indefinite, of English are the bane to foreign students of English. But the rule of thumb is that if you have been introduced to the object, or in this case, the character before, when they are secondly brought to your attention, they become all of a sudden a the instead of an So it was an odd sort of oversight in the manuscript. She does not tend to make that kind of an error very much. So I gave her a pass. Actually, there were a lot of things in this book which, were it not a writer that I felt an implicit trust for, I might have quibbled with more strongly. The book had a little bit of a feel of an old Humphrey Bogart gangster movie. You followed the adventures of these spies in the Congo who were safeguarding the uranium. Nobody at that time, in general, nobody outside of very small circles really even knew the import of uranium, why they were doing this, why the extreme level of secrecy was called for. So everything is told in a sort of a circuitous way. Diamonds were somewhat a euphemism for uranium, talk of diamond smuggling. But even there, given the historical record, you don't know 100% when they were talking about diamonds. Did they mean diamonds or did they mean uranium? Communications regarding the uranium were not written down to the greatest extent possible. There was a footnote in the ledgers of one of the companies where discussion was made of the various minerals that were being imported or exported, and there was a little footnote about uranium. But by and large, the mention of the word was avoided. And the book focuses on the period of time up until the dropping of the bombs in Japan. But it goes on a little bit further than that. And that was really where, for me, everything came together. I've read a decent amount about Lumumba and the assassination of Lumumba and the story behind that. Now, the earlier books I had read, very little information was available, and over time, more has become available in English. There was always more available in French, I believe, but that was of no help to me. So she does not delve into any of the particulars, but at least now I feel that I have pretty much a thorough understanding of the competition between the United States and Russia at the time of Lumumba's ascendancy to office. So you really get the sense she does not talk about the assassination in detail, but I believe it is pretty well known now that Eisenhower approved it, and you get the sense from this that Eisenhower approved the assassination of Lumumba with the best of intentions, for whatever that may be worth. The book goes on to give sort of the denouement, what happened to all of these spies who served in the Congo. A number of them became ill, possibly due to exposure to radiation of some sort. It's inconclusive. There's not much to prove one way or the other. And then finally, she concludes with talking about the laborers, the mine workers themselves, who, I mean, they were hand sorting the minerals without any sort of protection at all, and leaves you to understand that in the case of all of those workers, there's only anecdotal evidence at this point to go on, because nothing has been recorded, nothing has been studied, and so forth. So she posits at the one end the terrible bombings in Japan, and then at the other end, the mine in Congo where the uranium came from, which at that time the bomb could not have been produced without the Congolese uranium, and the utmost secrecy ensured that nobody really knew where it came from, and nobody even emphasized that aspect, the idea that really it just took possession of this material to be able to make such a bomb. All of the reports emphasized that it was the cleverness of the scientists. Actually, scientists all over the world were clever enough. They just lacked that vital ingredient. And I found that it was much more revealing than the movie Oppenheimer, which I saw earlier this year, which focused on the goings-on at Los Alamos. This book leaves you to understand that it was a much bigger project. I think it was an expenditure of $1 billion. Truman was pretty gleeful after the bombs had dropped. He said it was a big $1 billion gamble, and we won. So you get the sense of just the vast numbers of people employed in getting the whole thing together. I think there were 500,000 people at one time or another employed by the Manhattan Project. So this in tandem with the Morel books really gave me some continuity. Of course, the place of Belgium figures strongly in both books, but you understand even in the Congo, the notion of France and Russia being joined at the hip was still prevalent in the minds, at least of the strategizers in the U.S. And so it was very well considered that France would be the inroad for the Soviet Union getting its hands on the uranium, as indeed I believe did happen at some point. And so the uranium in the Congo remains a present bone of contention in the world, I guess. Einstein had argued for a world government, and she brings mention of that. The one mine that was so preeminent at the time was sealed with concrete when Belgium left and the Congolese took control of their own destiny to a degree. Now, if you know the history of that, with the I was going to say ouster, but that's not exactly right. The removal of Lumumba, a whole new era was ushered in the Congo, again, of foreign domination. Um, Lost my train of thought there. But so this book helped piece together an awful lot of disparate parts from my previous readings of the Congo. Other things that I have read certainly de-emphasized the uranium. So that mine was closed, but more deposits were found all over in the Katanga area. One quote that I recall said that the whole area is practically radioactive. So I bet it's really hard to get a clear picture of how things stand today, because nobody really wants anybody to know too much about where all of the uranium is. There are more deposits all around the world. At the time, during the war, the Congo was it. There was a little bit in Czechoslovakia, a little bit in Canada, but really the mother lode was in the Congo. So with that, I have jumped back into this, and although I wish I were reading more than one book a week, which seems to be my average, at least with this nonfiction, I have started this, and in the course of a day, I've only read the introduction. I keep reading a little bit and stopping. I've put some of these quotes in the community section on YouTube. You come across an idea and you just have to put the book down and think about it. And it just reminds me that speed is not everything when it comes to reading either. So that is my recent reads, an A+ month, I would say, and I will keep you posted as I continue. After this, I intend to read Cheaper by the Dozen, which is part of the rereading event, which will be occurring in December. But more on that at a future time. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.